Hello and welcome to the state of Kentucky. I'm Bruce Maples, publisher of Forward Kentucky, and we're glad to have you with us today. If you are watching live, thank you for taking the time to tune in. And remember that if you share comments on Facebook or YouTube, we can see them and we might share them on the show. We've got a lot of things going on right now, but one of the biggest pieces of news is that we have a new chair at the Kentucky Democratic Party. Ben Self has been chair, I think, since 2017, and he announced earlier this year that he was going to step down at the end of the year. There was a lot of speculation as to who might be chosen. There were a lot of names floated around, but last Saturday, the governor nominated and the state central executive committee chose Colmon Eldrige, and we are very excited to have him with us here today. So, Colmon Elridge, welcome to the state of Kentucky.
Thank you so much, Bruce. It's great to be with you.
I need to start right out by apologizing because I know that sometime down the road I'm going to misspell your name because I had an uncle named Eldridge, and the D just feels natural, you know. So just know that I'll try and catch it every time.
It's okay. It's the story of my life. The first time I ever got in trouble at school was because my teacher thought I was intentionally misspelling my last name. So from second grade on, I've just come to accept the D is always going to appear somewhere.
Yeah. So you were chosen last Saturday. How has this week been?
You know, it's been. I've told folks it's a lot like drinking out of about 8 fire hoses all on full blast. That said, it's been also really fulfilling to get to meet our staff and get to know the ones that I don't know, get to know them a little better and how they work and how they view their work and how they view their work contributing to the Democratic Party and to our mission, vision, and values. It's been great to connect and to reconnect with members of the state Central Executive Committee and Democrats from all across the state, even some expat Kentuckians who reached out to not only say congratulations, but to ask how they can help. And I'll be honest, from a personal standpoint, it has been a week where every day there's something that reminds me of the history we made on Saturday. One of the most important things that happened this past week was my aunt, my father's sister, who is 84. Called me, and my father died when I was 3, and she just said, you know, I saw it come across on Facebook, and I couldn't believe it. That's something your father would have just been overjoyed about, and that was special. It was really something that I'll hold with me for forever, really. So, you know, it's been a week now. It's been a hard week. You know, I told you I was running late because I was trying to get my 3-year-old dressed and off to the neighbors so we could have this interview. So, you know, being the new chair of the party and being a parent, being a husband, none of that stuff changes. You just add more to it. So,
well, we really appreciate you taking the time because I'm sure you're amazingly busy.
My pleasure.
So, you know, I could run out your bio and take time doing that, but let's just say, for the sake of time, you have lots of experience, lots of political experience, lots of government experience. It's not like you're coming into this brand new. So what would be the top 2 or 3 things out of that experience that you think you're bringing to KDP?
You know, I think when the governor asked me to do this, I took a couple of days, and one I had to talk to my wife, but the other part was thinking, okay, what could I bring? What would I do that might be different? So I think a couple of things. First, it's a I'm a Democrat. I'm proud to be one. I'm not a blind one. And I've said this before that, what happened on Election Day 2020 was difficult to take. But if you pay attention to politics like I do, we've been losing seats for cycles. And it wasn't just because Donald Trump was at the top of the ticket in 2020. I think that had a great deal to do with it. But over the cycles and over the years, we have lost our touch in communities. And I don't mean that from an egotistical standpoint. I mean, just, we're still a state where retail politics matters and communication matters. And so really being able to start at basics and just say, we've got to have conversations at the local level and reconnect and do a lot of listening to figure out where that disconnect came from and how we can, in a very authentic way, rebuild that trust. And in part, that's been the arc of my political career, has always been somehow coming in, building relationships and building trust. I think that's going to be key. The second part of that is to not take the hits from our friends on the GOP side of the aisle, not to take them lightly. I think for too long we have let the Republican Party define who we are as Democrats and Kentucky Democrats. And because oftentimes what they say is so ludicrous, we thought, well, there's no one who would believe it. But what we know is if you say something over and over and over again, even if it's a lie, people will believe it. And if you don't combat that, there's a sense that it's true. And so I think out the gate, you've seen my style is not cable news style, but it is aggressive, because I think we are well past being able to take the consequences of not fighting back. And I think third and importantly for the political side of things is not only to recruit great candidates, but it's to have the resources to have not only great candidates, but great campaigns and a great party. And so really beginning to invest in training opportunities, not just for candidates, but for campaign managers, fundraisers, digital folks. All of those components are not only needed to run a successful party, but to run a successful campaign. And we don't have the luxury of having a big bench. And so being able to identify that talent and invest in that talent at all levels, whether you want to run for city council or dog catcher, or you want to run for governor, right. We've got to make those investments. And those are kind of off the bat the three things that are guiding my my initial moves as the new chair of the Kentucky Democratic Party.
This is sort of an unfair question because you've only been there a week, but okay. It's not like you moved into the state from somewhere else. You have been around. So walking in the door, what sort of shape do you think KDP is in currently? And let me be more specific. As you look across the landscape, what's in good shape and what probably needs work?
I think what's in good shape is we have an incredibly talented team at KDP. They live and breathe the mission of the Democratic Party in a way that I believe is frankly what you need to survive. You have to really believe in this, or you're just doing the wrong thing. Right. And from that standpoint, I think we've lucked out on talented men and women who get it and who work hard. I think by and large we have a good and passionate base that really do understand. Look, being a Democrat in Kentucky right now is not in vogue. It's not a fashionable thing to do. So to still be setting out yard signs and still having executive committee meetings and doing the things that it takes. I really am I'm proud of that passion and the desire to not retreat in the face of what has definitely been a difficult season. What
Yeah.
I believe needs some work are the things that I've said. I think it's really hard for folks out in the counties to be able to fight back and aggressively fight back if we're not leading the charge from the state party. And so where we can lead that charge, where we can communicate down some message points so that whether they're at a local meeting or they're at Kroger or Save a Lot or at church, where politics is much more brutal in church than it ever is in partisanship. We want to make sure that our folks are connected to how to talk about these issues in a way that can reconnect the party to the ground in 120 counties. To me, that is the most critical, mission critical component to this. If we can't do that, then none of the other things matter because we're always going to be at a deficit. What I've said to Democrats is I think one of the things that happened, and I don't really point any fingers, I just think it happened. We had for so long, we had such a voter registration advantage that it was easy to scope out a scenario where we never lost that advantage. And where Democrats were always going to be in power, and we could lose a couple of seats here, but the rank and file, we're going to stay rank and file. One, that's just a false way of looking at what we're supposed to be doing. And two, obviously it didn't work. So we have to rebuild in a way where, look, if you look at the margins from Election Day, those were Democrats also voting straight ticket Republican.
Yes.
Like lock, stock, and barrel. They're not going to change their party ID. They're still Democrats. But what they say and what they mean is that the party has moved away from them. And the party sometimes has moved away from them because they haven't afforded those folks the dignity of asking the question, what do you need from us? And so those are the things that I think just pragmatically walking in, we have to do better. We have to get right. And as I told our staff earlier this week, we have a very short window to do that. If we're having the same conversation in April of 2021, then 2022 is going to be brutal. And 2023 is not going to be a walk in the park either. So we've got a very truncated amount of time to begin those conversations, to rebuild them in a way that it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to happen overnight. No one should expect we're going to retake the House just because, Colmon Eldrige is the chair of the Kentucky Democratic Party. But we have to start somewhere. And I think that's the most critical place that we can start.
I've been fascinated by watching Georgia. One of the things that I read actually now it's been some months ago, was a research study, I think out of Harvard, that said that most elections were not won by persuasion. You could not persuade people from the other party who were committed voters to come vote for your side. They just aren't going to do it. And so the idea of trying to persuade people to win an election really didn't work. This study said that what you needed to do was get new voters and more turnout. You needed to increase your turnout on your side.
Sure.
What do you think of that?
So I think there is some truth to that. Georgia is an interesting case study. My good friend Nikema Williams, who is the state party chair, outgoing state party chair. She's also a state senator and about to become the newest member of Congress from Georgia, taking the seat of my hero and hero to so many, Congressman John Lewis. But I've had this conversation with her even before I was even thought to be in contention to be the party chair here in Kentucky. And part of that case study is that they've had a steady influx of folks moving in to the Atlanta area, to the suburbs, and so their voter registration and new voter registration apparatus was really, I think, what made the difference in 2020. I think had they been a cycle or two earlier, Stacey Abrams would be governor right now.
Yeah.
They really capitalized on that. I believe, we don't have that many folks moving into Kentucky, but we do have a whole swath of people who are not registered to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in part of our role has to be to just ramp up our voter registration game and to make sure that that's not just happening around election season, but that's happening on a continuous basis. Because Georgia did that, and they did it in a series of conversations. They did it in a series of special made events, but they made voter registration a key strategy to not only turning the state for Joe Biden, but for all those down ballot races too. Persuasion, though, still matters, and it still matters in a place like Kentucky, where folks aren't writing off the Democratic Party. They just don't believe the Democratic Party is for them. And so the persuasion part of that is they're not necessarily sure the Republican Party is either, but they seem much more certain about what they want to do. Now, I would make the argument that the things they say they want to do are not only dangerous, but just long term have a dismal impact on our economy, on the rights of workers, and all of those things. But we have to make that case, and we have to make that case more forcefully than we have. I think, again, we've taken for granted that as Democrats, folks just know who we are and they know what we stand for.
Right.
And so to the extent that that's still true, I think both can live in the same universe where, yes, voter registration is key. New voter registration is key. But persuasion also is key, because I don't think it's that folks are settled on the Republican Party. We've just not given them an alternative that they could believe in.
That's a good point. And I have some ideas about that, and maybe I'll send them to you in an email.
Please do.
So when I was working in the corporate world and had a team that reported to me, my boss would call me in about this time of year and say, okay, what are you wanting to achieve? And if you achieve it, you'll think you're successful.
Yeah.
So without getting into any sort of long-term planning, what three things would you think that if you achieved them by April, you would have had a successful first quarter?
That's a great question, and I'll be honest, I still kind of struggle with that, in part because even as the chair of the Kentucky Democratic Party, I don't tend to make decisions alone. That's never been my work style, and so in meeting with our staff and talking with the governor and talking with the House and Senate Democratic caucuses, and frankly with folks throughout the Commonwealth. For me, those conversations are important because they not only give me a sense of where folks are, but what they believe we can get done, and how to prioritize that in a way where it's not just Colmon Eldrige as the chair dictating from on high, but it's something that collectively we say, okay, if we're going to start somewhere, let's start here, but also let's set some metrics that we can gauge our success in. I will tell you off the bat, I got a couple of really shocking messages, and I will put this in some context that as you said, I've just been chair since Saturday,
right?
But 3 different Republicans from different parts of the state at 3 separate times throughout this week sent me messages and said, look, we became Republicans. Some have been lifelong Republicans. Some became Republicans over the course of the last few years, especially probably in the Obama years. Said, look, these are the reasons we are or became Republicans. The things that we've heard you say in either interviews or on Twitter or in response to things that have been happening in real time, that has sold me on giving the Democratic Party a chance. A couple of them changed their party registration, which and then sent me pictures of it, which was very nice and very kind of them. I didn't need proof about that, but what it did tell me is that there is a hunger out there to be heard and to have a sense of if he's willing to, if he and the party are willing to stick up for themselves and fight for themselves, that maybe they are in this for me as well. And so I think in part how I'm going to judge success, not only in the first quarter, but throughout my tenure, is going to be how can we do that? And not just convert Republicans into Democrats or independents into Democrats, but make Democrats proud to be Democrats again. The other part of that is just not simple, but infrastructure building. In a really strong sense, are we setting up the trainings that people need? Are we reaching the folks that say they need them? As a parent, I've got an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a almost 3-year-old. We know that learning and learning virtually is kind of the thing we have to do now. So training Democrats and a host of different ways, or in terms of different competencies, all of a sudden becomes a little harder because you've got to do it virtually, which means you got to make sure that folks have the capacity, simply the bandwidth, literally, to be able to take part in those trainings. And so I also want to make sure that we're doing that. And if, I want to keep track of those numbers, and then how many of those folks are we then putting into campaigns or so there are things like that I'm thinking through and thinking through collectively with the staff, with leaders across the state. So ask me that question maybe next month, and I'll have a fuller answer outside of my first week. But that is a great question, and something that not only will we come to a conclusion of, but we're going to share publicly. I want Democrats to hold us accountable to the things we say we're going to do. And I think that's how you build credibility, and hopefully that's how we push ourselves to be successful.
Before we go any further, let me share one comment that came in from Facebook. Joni Prentice, who's a longtime Forward Kentucky subscriber, says that she really likes those 3 priorities you laid out in the beginning. And I have to be honest, I do too. So those are good. I want to ask some nuts and bolts questions. And again, these are probably unfair because you've only been there a week. I before the coronavirus, I went to the headquarters building, often enough, and the building is just in some bad shape. Have you got any sense of how much it would take to get it back to where it needs to be, or if there's funds to do that, or is that we need to have bake sales, or what?
I don't have a sense yet. It's one of the questions that I've had, but just not had the time to ask yet.
Sure.
But it is a priority for me for a couple of reasons. One, it is not in the best shape, and I don't mean that from a cosmetic standpoint, although there's something to be said there. I mean it from the standpoint that I've got staff that before the coronavirus work there every day, and one of the things that I take very personally and seriously is the health and well-being of my staff. And so making sure that the building is safe and just being in the building is not creating a health risk. I'm absolutely sure those questions have been asked, but I want to make sure that that's the case. And if that is the case, then the question becomes, as you were kind of saying, okay, like how do we do this?
Yeah,
I think it's going to be a little deeper than a bake sale. Although my son just like shook his head and was like, "I'm down for that." He's a budding baker. But I think that is something that we have to take seriously. I mean, that it's an old building, it's an iconic building, and so I get the reverence for it, but it's got to be made safe, it's got to be made healthy, and frankly, it's got to be made a place that can function for a political party in the 21st century.
Yeah.
So all of those things are, yes, they're on the list of to-do items that I've made for myself, and you just kind of put that on an accelerated course.
Well, it's like every day there's an election coming, so that's what we're spending our time on.
Yeah.
And I thought, the building certainly needs some attention. So have you met with the executive committee last Saturday? and you've known a number of them for a long time, I'm sure. So this is a hard question, and you can bypass it if you want. Uh, there have been some issues with attendance, I've been told, that people have said, well, we have a bylaw that says you're supposed to come to these meetings, and yet people don't come to them. Do you have any feelings about that, or have you thought about what that is going to look like?
I haven't heard that as an issue. I'm sure as I continue to make phone calls, that may come up. Um, my initial take on it, though, is we have bylaws for a reason, and we have to abide by the bylaws of our party. And if someone wants to change that, they can have a great conversation with me or George Mills, who's our bylaws chair,
Right.
and we can have that conversation. It kind of reminds me when I was in graduate school at Eastern Kentucky University. I became the executive vice president of student government, and we had a similar bylaws issue. And I said, look, I don't mind all of you all, having to resign if it means then we get folks that come in and understand that showing up is part of the job.
Right.
And so long as that is part of the job, there has to be some accountability. And that's what I'll say about it. I'm interested to have that conversation with whomever has expressed that to you, because I would share that. I would share that concern.
Okay. So I want to be sensitive to your time. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do and how you take hold of the reins. I'm very pleased to hear that there's a transition going on, unlike at the national level where we're not having a transition. One of the things that I think that you have hit on, and I want you to be thinking about how Forward Kentucky can help you, is this idea of redefining the word Democrat across the state. I think that's a real critical thing, and I'm really glad you brought that up. What can we do, not Forward Kentucky, but what can Democrats across the state do to help you?
First and foremost, it's stay engaged. There's nothing more. There's no more potent kryptonite to a political party than people who don't stay engaged, and that engagement is sometimes a critical engagement. It's folks saying very critically to the party, "You've not been meeting our needs." I need to hear those things. I need to hear not just what we do well, but what we don't do well. That's the only way that we can develop the skills and the resources that folks across the state need to build this party back to what not what it used to be. I don't want to have folks to have illusions of grandeur that we're going to be the as powerful as we were when Wendell Ford was running the party. But we can reclaim ground, and we can get back to a place where we are competitive, not only at the state house, but at the county and city level as well. It's going to take time, it's going to take effort, and it's going to take that resolve to stay engaged.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that folks are willing to roll up their sleeves and do that work with me and with this, with our state central committee and with our staff, with our governor and lieutenant governor, that's the most critical thing you can do for me right now. Share those ideas, share those concerns, share the things that you'd like to see more of, and then just help us roll up your sleeves and do what we can. I want to hit on something really quickly, and I apologize. I know I'm probably practicing the filibuster a little bit, but what you said about defining and redefining what it means to be a Democrat across Kentucky, to me, that too is something that, I'm sure there is some pollster or some, wordsmith out there that we could pay thousands of dollars to help us do that. The most important way of doing that is having those conversations county to county. because you begin to get a sense collectively of what we can say is a Kentucky Democrat. And does that mean that in Scott County, where I live, there may be one or two things that we add on because it's germane to Scott County? Sure, but that's also fine. We're a big enough party where we can agree on certain core issues and core values and beliefs, and add on things that are germane to where we live that don't go against those values or beliefs, but speak directly to the people that live there, that work there, that vote there. And so those conversations are going to be critical as well. And so, if nothing else, I would ask, pray for us, pray for me. Luckily, I don't have hair anymore, so there's no ability to pull that out. And then just join us.
Right.
I want people across. I want Democrats and progressives and center right Democrats. I want us all to be proud to be Democrats again. And I think we can do that, but it can't be done just by making me chair or by our staff or by a handful of activists. And it's got to be done by all of us.
Right. That's an excellent way to close, because it's got to be all of us. And I'm hopeful that we can get all of us and we can do that work. I would like to have you back sometime in February-ish. Reorg is what, April?
April.
Yeah. So I think it'd be worthwhile sometime in late February or early March to have another show really laying out how reorg works so that people can get engaged.
Absolutely.
And can be part of the process. Colmon Eldrige, there are many things that I can promise you that I can't necessarily control. But the one thing I can promise you that I can control is that I will be praying for you and thinking about you as you do this work, and many of us will.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
That was Colmon Elridge, the new chair of the Kentucky Democratic Party. We really appreciate him taking the time to be with us. You should go to kydemocrats.org and get on their email list if you're not already. And you should go to forwardky.com and get on our email list if you aren't already. Thank you for joining us. There will not be a show next week because of Thanksgiving week. We'll be back the week after that. This was the State of Kentucky, presented by Forward Kentucky. Thanks for joining us.